I found out my fiancée was trying to get back with her ex, so I ended things and took revenge. My name's Richard, and I'm 28 years old. I thought I had everything figured out. I had a job I liked, a small but cozy apartment, and a fiancée, Isabella, whom I believed was my forever. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started like any other evening. I was home from work, looking forward to a quiet night. Isabella had mentioned a meeting with some friends, so I was expecting to spend the night alone. But as I was scrolling through my phone, I noticed a message pop up on Isabella's laptop. She'd left it open, and my curiosity got the best of me. I saw a conversation thread with Adrien, her ex. Adrien. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew about him. He was a shadowy figure from her past, someone who had a dark reputation, a drug dealer known for his dangerous connections. Isabella had assured me many times that she was over him, that our future together was solid. But the messages I saw were different. The texts were intimate, filled with old inside jokes and expressions of longing. Adrien was trying to rekindle their relationship, and Isabella was responding with a mix of nostalgia and flirtation. My heart sank as I read through their exchanges. It was clear that she was considering getting back together with him. The betrayal stung deeply, cutting through the trust I had in her. I felt a wave of anger and hurt. How could she do this to me? We had been planning our future together, talking about marriage and starting a family. To think that she was looking back at Adrien, a man with a dangerous lifestyle, shattered everything I believed in. I could barely breathe as I stared at the screen. I tried to call her, but my hands were shaking too much. Instead, I sat there in a state of numb disbelief, my mind racing through all the memories of our relationship. The way she smiled at me, the plans we made, and the love we shared. It all felt like a lie now, tainted by the shadow of Adrien. When Isabella came home, I was sitting on the couch, trying to calm myself. I heard the door open and closed, and then her voice calling out to me. I didn't know how to start the conversation. How could I explain to her that I had seen everything and that I was crushed? She walked into the living room, her face lighting up when she saw me. But her smile faltered as she saw the expression on my face. I knew she sensed something was wrong. "Richard, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my voice. "Isabella, we need to talk. I saw your messages with Adrien. You're trying to get back with him, aren't you?" Her face turned pale, and she looked away, unable to meet my eyes. The silence between us was deafening. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard, I can explain. But I wasn't interested in excuses. I was too hurt, too betrayed." "Explain? What's there to explain? I saw the messages. You were considering going back to him. How could you do this to us?" She sat down next to me, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's not what you think. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Adrien reached out to me, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was confused, but I never wanted to hurt you." "Confused?" I almost shouted. "You're talking about a man who's involved in illegal activities. You're risking everything for him. And now, you're telling me you never wanted to hurt me? That's not good enough." Isabella reached out for my hand, but I pulled away. "Richard, please. I love you. I don't know what I was thinking. Adrien has a way of pulling me back in, but I'm committed to you. I want us to be together." Her words felt empty. The trust I had in her was shattered, and no amount of pleading could fix it. "I don't know if I can believe that anymore. The way you've acted shows that you're not as committed as you claim to be. You're putting me and our future at risk." She started crying openly now, and I felt a pang of guilt, but it was overshadowed by the betrayal I felt. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, let's talk about this. We can work through it." I shook my head, feeling the finality of the moment. "No, Isabella, I can't do this. I can't be with someone who's willing to throw everything away for someone like Adrien. I'm ending this relationship. It's over." Her sobs grew louder, but I was resolute. I couldn't stay in a relationship built on such a shaky foundation. I stood up, feeling a sense of finality and pain. "I need to be alone right now. I need to think. You should leave." She got up slowly, her face streaked with tears. As she walked out the door, I felt a hollow emptiness inside. The life I thought I had was crumbling. and I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I had to do something to reclaim my life. The betrayal was too much to bear. And as Isabella left, I began to formulate a plan to get back at Adrien, to ensure that he would pay for the pain he had caused. The evening after discovering Isabella's betrayal was agonizing. I spent hours pacing my apartment trying to make sense of everything. I couldn't focus on anything other than the mess Isabella and Adrien had created. My heart was still pounding with the sting of betrayal, and my mind was clouded with anger and confusion. When Isabella returned home later that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table, feeling a mixture of dread and resolve. I had made up my mind. I needed to confront her. I needed answers, even though I was afraid of what I would hear. As soon as she walked through the door, she saw the stern look on my face and knew something was wrong. She looked tired and distraught, but that did nothing to soften the blow of her actions. "Richard," she said, her voice trembling, "I know you're upset. Can we please talk?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I could keep my composure. "Sit down," I said, my voice clipped. I watched as she hesitantly took a seat across from me, her eyes avoiding mine. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I saw the messages between you and Adrien. I saw how you were talking to him, how you were considering getting back with him." Her face went pale, and she looked down at her hands. "Richard, I didn't mean for you to find out like this." I couldn't believe her. "So you were planning to go back to him? After everything he's done? After everything he represents?" She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "No, that's not it. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Adrien reached out to me, and I was confused. I didn't know how to handle it, but I never wanted to leave you." Her words sounded rehearsed, and I could see through her excuses. "Confused? Isabella, you're talking about a man who's involved in dangerous activities. You know what he's into, and now you're telling me that you were confused? That's not an explanation. It's a betrayal." She reached out to me, but I pulled back. "Please, Richard, I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what I was thinking. Adrien has a way of pulling me back in, but I swear I'm committed to you. I want us to be together." Her pleas only fueled my anger. "You say you're committed to me, but your actions show otherwise. How can I trust you after this? How can I believe that you're not going to go running back to him the moment things get tough?" Isabella's eyes filled with more tears. "I love you, Richard. I know I messed up, but please don't let this ruin what we have. We can work through this. I'll cut ties with Adrien. I promise." I shook my head, feeling a deep sense of loss. "It's not just about cutting ties, Isabella. It's about the fact that you were willing to risk everything for someone like him. I can't be with someone who would jeopardize our future like that." She started to cry harder, her sobs echoing through the room. "Richard, please, I'll do anything to make this right. Just give me a chance to prove that I'm serious about us." But the damage was already done. The trust was shattered, and no amount of promises could repair it. "I don't think there's anything left to salvage. You've shown me who you truly are, and I can't ignore that. I can't stay in a relationship where I constantly question your loyalty." Isabella's face was a mix of desperation and regret. "Richard, please don't do this. I know I made a mistake, but I love you. I don't want to lose you." Her words were filled with sincerity, but I couldn't overlook the gravity of her actions. "It's too late for that. I need to end this. I can't be with someone who has so little regard for our relationship." Her sobs grew louder, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew it was the right decision. I stood up, feeling the finality of the moment. "I need you to leave. I need to be alone right now to process everything." She stood up slowly, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm so sorry, Richard," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't respond. I just watched as she walked toward the door, her footsteps heavy with resignation. As the door closed behind her, I felt a crushing weight lift off my shoulders, but it was replaced by an overwhelming sense of sadness and betrayal. I was alone now, but I wasn't sure how to move forward. The pain of ending things with Isabella was profound, but it was clear that I couldn't continue in a relationship built on such betrayal. My mind raced as I thought about what to do next. I needed to regain control of my life and find a way to get back at Adrien for everything he had done. As I sat in the silence of my apartment, I began to form a plan. Adrien had caused too much harm, and I couldn't let him get away with it. I needed to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. The night after ending things with Isabella was one of the longest I've ever endured. My mind was consumed by a mix of anger and sadness. I had to find a way to channel my feelings into something productive. I knew I couldn't just sit around and let Adrien get away with everything he had done. As I sat in my dimly lit apartment, I began to piece together a plan. Adrien had always been a shadowy figure, someone involved in illegal activities that I had no real knowledge about. But I needed to gather concrete evidence to ensure his downfall. I needed to be meticulous and strategic. The first step was to recall everything I knew about Adrien. He had a reputation for being involved in drug trafficking, which was something I had heard about from Isabella, but never took seriously until now. I knew he had a network of people who were likely involved in this business. My goal was to gather enough information to convince the authorities that Adrien was a significant threat. I started by looking through the messages I had seen on Isabella's laptop. They were filled with codes and vague references that didn't make much sense to me, but they were definitely suspicious. I saved copies of these messages and started to organize them into a file. This was my first piece of evidence, but it wasn't enough on its own. Next, I needed more information about Adrien's activities. I remembered Isabella mentioning a few of his associates during our conversations. If I could find out more about them, I could potentially link them to Adrien's illegal operations. I began to do some research online, checking public records and news articles. I also reached out to a few mutual acquaintances who might have known something about Adrien's dealings. One of the most crucial parts of my plan was to track Adrien's movements. I had noticed he often met with certain people in a specific area of town. I decided to follow him one day to see if I could catch him in the act of something illegal. It was risky, but I was determined. The day I chose to follow Adrien, I made sure to stay out of sight. I watched from a distance as he met with various people. I saw him exchange small packages with one individual in particular. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. This was the evidence I needed. I took several photos of the transaction, making sure to get clear shots of Adrien and the people he was dealing with. With these photos in hand, I started to piece together a detailed report. I included everything I had: messages, photos, and descriptions of Adrien's activities. It was important to present a well-organized case to the authorities. The next step was to contact the police. I knew I had to be careful. I needed to make sure they took my report seriously. I made an appointment with a detective, preparing myself for a meeting that could potentially change everything. On the day of the meeting, I was nervous but resolute. I arrived at the police station with my report in hand. The detective I was scheduled to meet with was a no-nonsense type, someone who had seen a lot in his career. I explained the situation, presenting the evidence I had gathered. As I laid out the details, the detective listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. I showed him the messages, the photos of the transactions, and explained how Adrien was involved in drug trafficking. I felt a sense of satisfaction as I saw the detective's reaction. He seemed to take my report seriously. "We'll need to investigate this further," the detective said after reviewing everything. "But this is a good start. Thanks for bringing this to us." I left the police station with a mix of hope and apprehension. I knew that the investigation would take time, and there was no guarantee of immediate results. But I felt like I had taken the first significant step in my plan for revenge. In the days that followed, I kept a low profile. I knew that Adrien might suspect something if he realized I was involved. I continued to monitor the situation from a distance, trying to stay informed about any developments in the investigation. As time passed, I heard through the grapevine that Adrien was under investigation. The news brought a sense of relief, but I also knew that there was still a long way to go. I had to wait and see how things unfolded. The more I thought about the situation, the more I realized how deeply it had affected me. I had lost trust in someone I once loved, and had to take drastic measures to find some semblance of justice. The emotional toll of the whole situation weighed heavily on me. I had to remind myself that I was doing this to stand up for myself, to make sure Adrien faced consequences for his actions. I was in for a long and difficult journey, but I felt a sense of determination to see it through. I was ready for whatever came next, prepared to face the fallout of my actions, and hoping that, eventually, Adrien would pay for the pain he had caused. The days after I submitted my report to the police felt like an endless waiting game. Every moment was filled with anxiety and anticipation. I had done everything I could to provide a solid case against Adrien, but now it was out of my hands. All I could do was hope that the evidence I gathered was enough to make a difference. Then, one morning, I received a call from the detective I had met with. His voice was firm, but there was an undertone of urgency that made my heart race. "Richard, we've been investigating Adrien based on the evidence you provided. I'm calling to let you know that we've made significant progress. We have enough to move forward with his arrest." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "It means Adrien will be facing serious charges. We've been able to corroborate your evidence with other sources, and we're confident that he'll be prosecuted for his involvement in drug trafficking," the detective explained. The news hit me with a mix of relief and apprehension. Adrien was finally going to face consequences for his actions, but I knew that the road ahead would still be challenging. A few days later, I watched the news with a mix of disbelief and satisfaction. The headlines announced Adrien's arrest and detailed his involvement in drug trafficking. The authorities had raided several locations connected to him and seized a substantial amount of illegal substances. The news coverage was extensive, and it seemed like Adrien was being portrayed as a major player in the criminal world. Isabella's reaction was a mixture of shock and despair. She called me the next day, her voice trembling. "Richard, I can't believe this. Adrien is all over the news. This is a nightmare." I felt a cold satisfaction at her distress. "I'm sure it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You were the one who chose to get involved with him. I gave you a chance to come clean, and you chose him instead." Isabella tried to explain, but her words were incoherent. "Richard, I was wrong. I know that now. But please, this is more than I ever expected. I didn't think it would come to this." Her pleas fell on deaf ears. I had made my decision, and the consequences were playing out exactly as I had hoped. "It's too late for apologies, Isabella. You need to face the reality of your choices." The fallout from Adrien's arrest was significant. The media coverage was relentless, and his name was being dragged through the mud. Isabella found herself in the middle of a public scandal. Her reputation was tarnished by her association with Adrien, and she faced harsh judgment from friends, family, and the community. I watched from a distance as Isabella's life fell apart. I knew it was a harsh reality, but it was a direct result of her decisions and the consequences of being involved with someone like Adrien. I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, but I felt a sense of justice being served. The investigation into Adrien's criminal activities revealed a web of illegal operations. The authorities discovered more evidence of his involvement in drug trafficking, leading to serious charges and a lengthy legal battle. Adrien was facing significant prison time, and his criminal empire was dismantled, piece by piece. Throughout this process, I focused on my own healing. The emotional toll of everything that had happened was immense. I had to come to terms with the end of my relationship with Isabella and the betrayal I had experienced. The pain was still fresh, but I knew that moving forward was the only option. In the midst of all this, I found solace in small things, working on personal projects, spending time with friends, and slowly rebuilding my sense of self. I started to feel a sense of empowerment, knowing that I had taken control of my situation and sought justice for the wrongs done to me. Isabella's public humiliation was a painful reminder of the consequences of her actions. She faced harsh judgment and had to deal with the fallout from her choices. I could see that she was struggling, and part of me felt a pang of sympathy for her, but the reality was that she had to face the repercussions of her decisions. As I moved forward, I focused on finding my own path and learning from the experience. The road to recovery was not easy, but I was determined to find a way to heal and rebuild. The pain of betrayal was a heavy burden, but I was learning to carry it with grace and resilience. The final chapter of this painful saga was marked by a profound sense of closure. Adrien's arrest and the subsequent exposure of Isabella's involvement had changed everything. I had faced the harsh reality of betrayal and had taken action to ensure that justice was served. Now, as I looked ahead, I was ready to move on and build a new life, one where I could find peace and happiness once again. The weeks that followed Adrien's arrest were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. As the dust began to settle, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened and trying to piece together my new reality. For me, there was a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing that Adrien was facing the consequences of his actions. The sense of justice I felt was a bittersweet victory. It was a relief to see that someone who had caused so much pain and chaos was finally being held accountable. But at the same time, the whole experience had taken a heavy toll on me. I spent a lot of time alone, trying to make sense of everything. My friends and family reached out, offering support and trying to help me through the emotional turmoil. Their kindness was a comfort, but it was still a struggle to navigate my feelings. The betrayal had left deep scars, and even though I had sought revenge, the emotional healing was slow and challenging. One of the things that helped me move forward was focusing on my own well-being. I threw myself into my work and began exploring new hobbies that had always interested me, but I had never had the time for. I started taking long walks, practicing mindfulness, and even signed up for a cooking class. Small changes began to make a big difference in how I felt. Meanwhile, Isabella's world had been turned upside down. The media frenzy around Adrien's arrest had exposed her involvement, and the public humiliation was almost unbearable. The stories and gossip surrounding her were relentless. Friends and family who had once been supportive were now distant, unable to cope with the scandal or choose sides. I saw Isabella a few times in public, and it was hard to ignore the visible strain on her face. She looked exhausted and defeated, a stark contrast to the vibrant person I had once known. The shame and regret she must have been feeling were evident, and though part of me wanted to show sympathy, I couldn't forget the hurt and betrayal. One evening, I ran into Isabella at a cafe. It was an uncomfortable encounter, and neither of us was sure what to say. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and apology. "Richard? I'm sorry for everything. I know there's no way to make it right, but I need you to know that I regret my actions deeply." Her words were heavy with genuine remorse, but they also felt like a bitter reminder of what had transpired. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's too late for apologies, Isabella. What's done is done. I hope you find a way to deal with everything that's happened." The encounter left me feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I had moved on from the relationship, but seeing Isabella's struggle reminded me of the pain I had gone through. I hoped that she would eventually find some sort of redemption or peace, but it was clear that her life would never be the same. As for me, I continued to focus on rebuilding my life. I began to reconnect with old friends and build new relationships. It was a slow process, but each step forward helped me reclaim a sense of normalcy. The pain of the past was still present, but it no longer defined my every moment. The experience had taught me a lot about resilience and the complexities of justice. Seeking revenge had brought a sense of closure, but it had also highlighted the harsh realities of human behavior. I had learned that while holding others accountable was important, it was equally crucial to focus on personal healing and moving forward. In time, I began to find happiness again. I embraced new opportunities and allowed myself to envision a future free from the shadows of betrayal. The journey was far from easy, but it was a path to self-discovery and growth. Looking back, I realized that the pain of betrayal had been a profound teacher. It had shown me the strength I didn't know I had, and forced me to confront the depths of my own emotions. While I wished things could have turned out differently, I was grateful for the lessons learned and the chance to rebuild my life. As I closed this chapter and looked ahead, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The aftermath of my quest for justice had been both challenging and enlightening. I was ready to embrace the future, knowing that I had faced my past with courage and had emerged stronger on the other side. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. See you next time.